The Kansas City Chiefs find themselves 11-1. They have clinched a playoff spot. They have a 1.5 game lead in the AFC for the number 1 seed, and if they beat the Chargers in their very next game, they will win the AFC West for the 9th consecutive season. I have put together some stats, some numbers, some thoughts on why we should be more excited than we seem to be as a fan base while looking at this season for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I want to start here. We make a great big deal of how many games the Kansas City Chiefs have won by a single possession. Is that a big deal? Yeah. Yeah, it'd be really nice to have some convincing wins, to have some dominant wins, to have some 21-point wins on the schedule, as do the Detroit Lions. That would be nice. But we're making very little of the fact that this team is just 10 points from being 12-0. 10 points from having a perfect season through 13 weeks and 12 games. Does this team have weaknesses that could eliminate them from the playoffs once they get to the playoffs? Yes, and so will every team in the playoffs. That's the nature of the NFL. But all of those other teams that might be in the playoffs still just might be in the playoffs. None of them have clinched. The Kansas City Chiefs, through 13 weeks and 12 games, are the only team to have clinched a playoff berth. And in fact, the Lions, who are probably springing to your mind, hey, haven't the Lions clinched? No, they have not. They haven't even, they might not win their division. It is possible that they don't. It is very possible that they don't, because the other team in their division is the Minnesota Vikings, and they have a record very close to the Lions. So if a couple things go against the Lions during the regular season, during the next 6 games for the Lions, they could find themselves as a wild card team. Technically, the Chiefs could as well, but they're 1 win away from that not being the case. By the way, right now, looking at that playoff picture, the number 2 seed in the AFC, the number 1 seed is the Chiefs, the number 2 seed, the Buffalo Bills, the number 3 seed, the Steelers, the number 4 seed, the Texans, 5, the Ravens, 6, the Chargers, and 7, the Broncos. The Kansas City Chiefs have played the Bills and lost. The Kansas City Chiefs will play the Steelers and Texans, and the Kansas City Chiefs have already beaten the Ravens, Chargers, and Broncos. Right now, the Kansas City Chiefs would be the recipient of the lone bye week in the AFC portion of the playoffs, and they would then face the lowest-ranked team that emerges from Wild Card Weekend. The lowest team that emerges from Wild Card Weekend could be the Texans if all of the favorites win, but it could also very likely be one of either the Ravens, Chargers, or Broncos, who the Kansas City Chiefs have already beaten. In any case, from that list, the Kansas City Chiefs are going to know by the end of this season exactly where they stand on that pecking order of teams by direct competition. The Chiefs have played Bills, Ravens, Chargers, Broncos. They will play the Steelers and the Texans. So the next teams up, by the way, the Colts are number 8, the Dolphins number 9, the Bengals are number 10, and after that the odds fall off precipitously. The Browns have a 1% chance to make the playoffs as the 11 seed right now, whether they win or lose this upcoming week. So it is likely that the Kansas City Chiefs will be facing a team at some point in the playoffs that they have already beat, and they will have experience with all of these teams by the time they play in the playoffs if the 8 Colts, or 9 Dolphins do not make the postseason. Now, in order to scaffold the points that I am going to make, I pulled up an Arrowhead Pride article from Rocky Magana, and it is this week's 5 things we learned from the Chiefs game. 5 things we learned from the Chiefs' ugly win against the Raiders. Some things continue to be trending in the wrong direction for the defending champs. I plucked out the number 5 point that he makes here. You don't luck into 11 wins and a playoff berth in November. This team has issues. It has glaring problems that need to be fixed. It also has a 1.5 game lead on the Buffalo Bills for the number 1 seed and a bye in the playoffs. On Friday, with 5 games left in the season, the Chiefs secured a playoff berth. As much as we criticize the holes on the team's roster, that does not happen by accident. You have to be doing 1,000 other things right to make up for the other things going wrong. What the Chiefs have accomplished this season is remarkable by any measure. If the team can figure out a way to continue to win these close games, it can post the best record in franchise history. Yes, that's a big if. But no matter how the rest of the regular season plays out, the Chiefs have punched their ticket to an opportunity to compete for the Super Bowl and get three-peat. And get the three-peat. I am going to be mentioning in the offensive portion of this video Patrick Mahomes a lot, but I think that's because we look at this team and its current iteration as a manifestation of the Patrick Mahomes era. What are we really talking about? We're talking about the Kansas City Chiefs since they began winning Super Bowls, which may be jilting our opinions just a little bit. Patrick Mahomes is 85-23 in 108 career starts. That's a 787 winning percentage. Tom Brady's career winning percentage was 749. Now, at some point, I know the law of large numbers comes into play, and the 749 winning percentage over a 23-year career is more impressive than the 787 winning percentage over a career that's about 1/3 as long as that. Yes, that's true. But what we are seeing is still a run that has more wins per game than Tom Brady. That's still what we are seeing. In fact, by the time we get to the playoffs, should the Chiefs win a single playoff game this season, not guaranteed, but if it happens, Patrick Mahomes becomes tied with Joe Montana for second all-time with 16 playoff wins. Peyton Manning, John Elway, and Terry Bradshaw. 3 guys who no one would blink if you put them on the Mount Rushmore of quarterbacks. Peyton Manning, John Elway, and Terry Bradshaw are currently 4th with 14 wins. Patrick Mahomes, in his few short seasons, in his less than a decade in the NFL, has more wins than the entirety of Peyton Manning's career, than the entirety of John Elway's career, than the entirety of Terry Bradshaw's career. What we are witnessing with the Kansas City Chiefs this year is being jilted, is being tilted, is being measured differently because of everything else that we have seen through the career of Patrick Mahomes thus far. Adding to that, the legacy of Patrick Mahomes just passed Lynn Dawson for the most passing touchdowns in franchise history. Patrick Mahomes is not yet 30 years old. Last season, this plays into what we're going to see in the playoffs. Last year, Patrick Mahomes did not really run as much in the regular season as he could have. He instead chose to throw the ball while scrambling as opposed to running for yards and first downs and touchdowns. We saw him really bridle back on those attempts. He had a lot of attempts, but he had the opportunity to run much more, opting to throw the ball away, opting to force the pass towards a wide receiver, opting against risking injury while running around. Last season, he scored 0 rushing touchdowns for the first time in his career as a full-time starter. He chose this to stay on the field. He had had injury problems the previous few seasons, even if it meant punting the ball later in the series. He ran the ball 75 times during the course of 16 games, which is 4.68 runs per game. Then, the playoffs happened, and if Mahomes did not like what he saw, he tucked the ball and ran. This made the Kansas City Chiefs offense much less predictable, much more wild, much more explosive, because they had to keep the defenses had to keep assets closer to the line of scrimmage, opening things up behind them. He ran the ball last year 4.68 yards per game. This year, he is averaging just 3.83 yards per game, nearly an entire attempt less per game. This doesn't seem like it makes a whole lot of sense to be talking about, but what it means is once this team gets to the playoffs and things are do or die, Patrick Mahomes is going to tuck the ball and get the first down. He is refusing to do that very much this season. He is scrambling. He is forcing a pass downfield. He is throwing the ball away, but he is not tucking the ball and running, sacrificing his body and risking injury in order to procure a first down and keep drives alive. It is not worth that risk in the regular season. It is in the playoffs, because if you lose, you go home. That is going to change the dynamic for this offense very, very much come the postseason. Add to that, Isaiah Pacheco is back. He and Hunt can now form the dynamic duo of smash and smash faster. This is going to be, look at all of the times the Kansas City Chiefs ran the ball with just Kareem Hunt, and when Kareem Hunt was wearing down, it just didn't go very well. Kareem Hunt does not lose yards, but sometimes he's not quite fast enough to gain yards. With Isaiah Pacheco in the backfield with Kareem Hunt, defenses are going to be ground down. Should the Kansas City Chiefs return to running the ball, something they did not really do very often against the Raiders, especially in the second half. Should the Kansas City Chiefs return to that, it is going to be difficult for defenses to deal with. Add to that, Xavier Worthy is really coming into his own at this point in the season, having nearly half of his season's total receiving yards in the last 3 weeks. This is the same sort of thing that we ended up seeing with Rashee Rice during his rookie season. It's happening a couple weeks later for Xavier Worthy. But it is happening. It is happening. Xavier Worthy is carving out a niche for himself in this offense that should make him a danger to defenses come the postseason. Now let's talk a little bit about the defense on a season basis. The only time the Chiefs have had a record this good through 12 games was 2020, when Mahomes' record as a starter during that regular season was 14-1. Now, I don't really remember that 2020 season having a postseason. It seems that it was canceled that year. I don't remember anything happening after the season, and no one can talk me into believing that there was anything that happened in Tampa Bay. During that 2020 season, however, the defense gave up 40 points to the Raiders. They gave up 38 points to the Chargers, 31 points to the Panthers, and that second time to the Raiders, and they gave up 29 points to the Saints. Those were explosive days for opposing offenses. 40 points, 38 points, 31 points, 31 points, and 29 points. This season, the defense has given up more than 27 points just once to the Bills. They've given up more than 20 points just 4 times to the Bengals, Bucks, Bills, and Panthers. That 2020 season, The defense gave up more than 28 points on 5 occasions. This year, they've given up more than 20 points just 4 times. Now, it's not the entire season. I get it. But it is difficult to imagine the defense having that large of a collapse, especially when you think of it this way. 20 points is less than 3 possessions. 3 possessions can be 21 points. If you were telling me that the Kansas City Chiefs have an entire game to get 3 possessions, 21 points, worth of points, I will trust Patrick Mahomes, whatever offense and whatever offensive line he's commanding. Add to this, Charles Omenihu has returned to the lineup and made an impact in his first game, though he ended the game with only 1 tackle on the day. Chris Jones and George Karlaftis saw less attention and served up 2 and 1 sacks, respectively. Charles Omenihu will make a difference on this defense whether he's getting the sacks or not. And much the same way that Patrick Mahomes, come the playoffs, will be running the ball more often. He will tuck the ball and take off in order to get a first down. The defense in the playoffs, you bet bigger. You don't just game plan, you try to take things away, and you get more aggressive in order to do it. Spags will double team wide receivers in the playoffs. Spags will double team tight ends in the playoffs. Spags will blitz more than we have seen him blitz thus far in the regular season. In the playoffs, things come down to individual series, things come down to individual plays, things come down to individual matchups. This team is as good as any for making those matchups work in their favor. This team has the experience to know that, yes, one play can be all the difference in the playoffs. Look at how many times this team has been to the playoffs. Look at how many games Patrick Mahomes has won in the playoffs. All of these players that have been here with this team for those games understand how the playoffs work and how they are different. Things come down to individual plays in the playoffs. And this team has the experience to execute individual plays at a time. That's all I have for this video. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Kansas City Chiefs are the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. And I hope to have you back for the next one, so consider hitting the subscribe button.